Today I'm going to focus on the great state of North Carolina on the American Eastern Seaboard. North Carolina is a big target for the left, both the Communist Party of China and its minions operating at grassroots level in the country. There are a couple of reasons for this. For a start, the Triangle area has fantastic universities, cutting-edge research. It's a great place to recruit spies and to steal information and technology for the Chinese Communist Party. Straight at political level, North Carolina is sort of a swing state. It is a Republican-leaning state, but it currently has a Democrat governor, which makes it pretty tough for the conservatives in the state to get anything done. And it is a large black and minority population that will vote Democrat if it's motivated to vote, and can be used to flip the state and move it permanently into the blue column. And if that happens, it would be very, very difficult for any Republican to ever win the presidency of the United States. Now, there's a pattern for this. This is part of a much bigger program. I've spoken before about New Virginia Majority in the neighboring state. Now, they were set up about 2005, and their goal was to flip Virginia from the red column, from the Republican column, which it was strongly in, and to the blue column, the Democrat column, which it now is pretty much consolidated. And this was done with a lot of hard work. New Virginia Majority, which was set up by a pro-Chinese Communist Party called Liberation Road. It used to be called Freedom Road Socialist Organization, but it changed its name recently to Liberation Road, and that's what I will refer it to from now on, just to save confusion. They signed up 300,000 minority voters in the state, and they also worked with Terry McAuliffe to legalize and give voting rights back to 200,000 Virginia felons. That is what flipped the state. Now, they were successful because New Virginia Majority was using very sophisticated GIS computer maps. And they could tell you every precinct in the state, the populations, the minorities that lived there, the income levels, voting patterns. So they could send Iranian volunteers into Iranian areas. They could send Puerto Rican volunteers into Puerto Rican areas. So a very sophisticated operation. And those maps were actually generated by a Liberation Road communist called Steve McClure, a graduate of the geography department of George Mason University, who's been generating those maps for the last 10 years out of the geography department of Wuhan University, China. So the Chinese flipped Virginia. And that New Virginia Majority boasted in an op-ed in the New York Times that they flipped the state. Didn't mention they were pro-Chinese communists, but they boasted they flipped the state. And this is the model for North Carolina, but not just North Carolina, for Georgia, for Arizona, for Florida, Tennessee. The goal of the communists, the American pro-Chinese communists, is to flip the South to the Democratic Party. They call the South the New Confederacy. They say that it is the stronghold of the Republican Party and of conservative Christianity. And if the left can flip 2 or 3 or 4 southern states, that will destroy the Republican Party as a nationwide party and guarantee Democratic control over this country forever going forward. And the Democratic Party is way more friendly to the Chinese Communist Party than are some elements of the Republican Party. There's some bad elements in the GOP and the Republican Party, but by and large, you have a lot of people in the Republicans who do not trust the Communist Party of China, and quite rightly so. So what are they doing in North Carolina? What's their model there? Well, in recent years, Liberation Road communists have moved people into the state, into the Triangle area and to Durham. Durham has got the large black population. The Triangle area has got lots of students. And they're key demographics for their operation. They're potential Democrat voters. There's been a Maoist network operating in North Carolina for decades, right since the 1970s, when the New American Movement and the Communist Workers' Party were very active in Greensboro and other cities in the state. In Durham, some of those groups morphed into a group called the Durham People's Alliance, sometimes just called the People's Alliance. And this is a voter registration, civic activism group that endorses candidates and gets involved in elections and has been working in Durham for some years. And in recent years, it's been pretty heavily infiltrated by members of Liberation Road, serving on its board, etc. And so in more recent times, Liberation Road set up another group in Durham called Durham for All. You know, in Memphis, they've got Memphis for All. In Richmond, Virginia, they have Richmond for All. They have Florida for All. They're setting up a San Diego for All. These are Liberation Road front groups. Now, Durham for All has also worked now with more organizations down home North Carolina, which is another one of their front groups, which is targeting more rural communities. They also have the Forsyth County Freedom Federation, Guilford for All, the New Hanover for All in New Hanover County. And these groups all come under the banner of a new group called the Carolina Federation. So this is an umbrella group that unites all of these voter registration organizations, these activist groups under one umbrella, focusing their efforts into flipping the state blue, turning the state to the Democrats. I want to list some of the key activists involved in this process. The first one is Sendolo Diamana. He is the head of the Carolina Federation, former head of Durham for All, a former school board member in Durham, and also now a current board member of the Durham People's Alliance. This guy is a very, very active communist, the former general secretary of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization when it went by that name.
Durham County, Guilford County, New Hanover County, and Forsyth County. And those are spread out across the center part of our state and the eastern part of our state. And then we have partners like down home North Carolina, who was having conversations specifically in small town and rural counties, which are a critical part as we are looking at these elections. If we're not moving people in those places, having real connecting conversations that transform who they're understanding as the real opponents in this moment and who they're understanding as their real allies, we're not going to make it happen just by talking to the people who already agree with us. We have to be engaging both working class folks of color and the folks of color and white folks and working people in rural and small towns. Like that whole range are people who we need to be engaging. And then, of course, we also had allies who were focusing almost exclusively in suburban neighborhoods, et cetera. But our organization actually had the full range in terms of the people who we're trying to talk to, because we think if we're going to govern society, we need to be talking to everybody. And we need to be thinking about what does it take to build a majority, and how do we build strategies and stories that can build that majority right now. So we were talking to a whole range of people.
Next one, Brian Prophet. He is the leader of the Durham Association of Educators, the Durham Teachers Union, also very senior in the North Carolina Association of Educators. And he's a Liberation Road communist. He helped to turn the teachers of North Carolina into a voting bloc and a much more militant force. So he's involved in elections as well. Now, then there's Aidan Graham, also of the Carolina Federation, formerly with Durham for All, and formerly a board member of the Durham People's Alliance. Now, he is now the campaign chairman of the North Carolina AFL-CIO. So what he's doing, he's working for the North Carolina union movement to mobilize as many people as they can, union members, targeted communities, for the Democratic Party. So again, involved in elections. Now, Aidan Graham works very closely with Mary B. McMillan. She is the president of the North Carolina AFL-CIO. Now, I don't know if she's a Liberation Road member. She's very close to some of their front groups. But here's a picture of her from 2016 in California with a big People's World banner behind her. That is the newspaper of the Communist Party USA. And like Liberation Road, this is a pro-Chinese communist organization, and the two groups work very closely together. Next one up, Whitney Maxie. She serves on the executive committee of Liberation Road. She is a leading communist. She is now leading the campaigns for Durham for All. Previously, she worked in Florida and then in Tennessee, where she worked in Memphis for All, which is working to mobilize the black populations of Memphis, Tennessee, to flip statewide elections in that state.